Shalom all! I hope that one of the episodes soon we will be able to focus on the intra-Israel news, such as the high court cases regarding the district attorney and the GSS head being appointed. But for now, let's go over some regional news. So as often, we will start with Gaza. The GHF, the humanitarian foundation that's working there recently, started by the Americans and with the support of Israel, it continues to distribute food packages to tens of thousands of families. But despite their good work, the other humanitarian agencies are refusing to work with them and calling the GHF a ploy to militarize and politicize the humanitarian aid. Hamas is doing its best to scuttle the project by attacking and killing dozens of its own citizens, as well as attacking and kidnapping workers of the GHF, and even wounding two of the American contractors of the GHF. The media is, of course, lying through its teeth and claiming that the IDF is randomly shooting and killing dozens of people who are only coming to get food packages, and not a single word about Hamas's atrocious crimes. Now, I'd like to take a moment to explain, using the example of the media, one of the main reasons that the UN and other agencies are part of the problem and not very helpful. A couple days ago, I watched an interview with the chief editor of AP, Associated Press, in Israel back in the late 2000s. And he explained that after Hamas took over in 2006, specifically, he detailed an example in 2008 where one of their AP journalists in Gaza, an Arab, filed a report about a story that happened, and after he'd already filed the article with the editor, he called the editor and begged him to remove incriminating details that would have incriminated Hamas in crimes against humanity, and so on and so forth. And it was obvious that Hamas had come to his house and threatened him. And since that time, along with other similar stories, all of the press agencies working within Gaza have kowtowed to Hamas and do not report their crimes. For example, most stories, this is part of their strategy, most stories that they share start always with casualty numbers, like 50 Arabs killed versus 1 Israeli killed, so that no matter what the story actually is, the statistical narrative of Arab victims takes over. Not to mention that the number of casualties are handed over directly by the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry, and they are used without question. This has now been the case for the last 17 years, and all of the press agencies are culpable in this. They no longer have any freedom. There are basically 3 categories of press agents in the Gaza Strip. First, there are those who identify with the Hamas. Second, there are those who are intimidated by the Hamas. And third, are those who work for the Hamas. And this is why all of the press that you get is incredibly biased, pro-Hamas, anti-Israel, will never say anything against Hamas, and will always say horrible things about Israel. That's just how it's been since the Hamas took over. And it makes sense too. I mean, some international agent who works for an agency, why is he gonna allow himself and his family to be murdered by Hamas in order to share a story that is against the narrative, when all the other hundreds of journalists are likewise intimidated by Hamas and will not share such stories? But anyways, the press is just one example, and this is true in all aspects of life in Gaza, whether it's medical aid, education, food distribution, and so on. As we've mentioned before, the food is taken by Hamas and sold at exorbitant prices to fill their war chests, and barely if any of it gets to the people. And that is why the GHF is so critical to replace the corrupt system that ensure Hamas's survival and continue to perpetuate the people's suffering. Another matter in Gaza is that the head of the Abu Shabab militia, which is currently acting as security in areas not under control by Hamas in the south, and is viewed by Hamas as an enemy, they wish to have him killed or arrested, has stated that he sees no other alternative to a civil war with Hamas. The Abu Shabab militia is still relatively small, in the hundreds, and supposedly it's being armed by Israel and works with Israel. And this takes us to another story, a brand new story out of Hebron, where a half dozen important and influential sheiks have made it clear and known this week that they wish to disconnect from the Palestinian Authority and somehow enter a new arrangement with Israel under the Abraham Accords as the Emirate of Hebron. And I will of course try to give you more information on this in another episode, but it's interesting to see that these different initiatives are coming from different agents within the Arab community that are seeking an alternative to Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. All right, let's move on. In Lebanon, the Lebanese Prime Minister Nawaf Salem met with U.S. Representative Tom Brack to discuss plans to disarm the Hezbollah. Israel is continuing to strike at Hezbollah personnel. About every 2 to 3 days, I see a report on a drone or aircraft striking terrorists in South Lebanon. And recently, on Tuesday, there was a report of an interview with the current head of Hezbollah, Naim Qassem, who was being brutally honest on how hard it's been for the Hezbollah, how the beeper strike hit them so badly, and so on and so forth, how the fact that he in his recent interviews came off very poorly and sweating was just because the conditions in the bunker he was in are so bad. Basically, not a very impressive leader so far, but let's hope that continues. We don't want them to have impressive leaders, unless, of course, they wish to have peace, in which case we would want a strong, courageous leader. Moving on. In Syria, the United States and the United Kingdom have removed economic sanctions from Syria, and the United Kingdom has decided to renew formal diplomatic relations with Syria. The U.S., in particular Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, are positively considering inviting the new president of Syria to the UN summit in New York in September. The IDF is working east of the Golan border and has arrested multiple Iranian terrorist cells in Syria over the last few weeks. And speaking of Iran, even though it's not exactly Iran, but Iran-related, the British Telegraph reported that during the 12-day war, half a dozen Israeli army bases were hit by Iranian missiles, which is news that we in Israel did not receive from the IDF spokesperson. Understandable, because we don't want to assist the Iranians in targeting, but it's still interesting, including the Tel Nof air base and the Glilot intelligence base. Now, that brings me to a matter which often people ask: if Israel has the Iron Dome and the David Sling, as well as the US THAAD and Patriots, how is it that missiles hit bases, a hospital, as well as, of course, multiple civilian targets with 28 casualties? Now, my technical knowledge of these systems doesn't allow me to give a technical answer, but I can say what I've heard from different spokespeople and politicians, which basically comes down to nothing is 100% hermetically sealed and is 100% proof of missiles, and the successful interception rates are extremely high, and the number of targets hit and casualties are extremely low, and that's considered resounding success in the world of anti-missile systems. Now, if you take this as truth or fact, or as propaganda, is up to you. I take it with a grain of salt, but overall it seems plausible and to make sense. During the 1991 Gulf War, 26 missiles launched by Iraq landed in Tel Aviv and caused 76 casualties, although most of them were indirect causes like heart attacks and incorrect use of gas masks. But still, if there were 76 casualties in that war with 26 missiles, then 28 casualties with hundreds of missiles makes me think that our systems are working reasonably well. Now, moving a little farther out to Yemen. The Houthis have launched a missile or two at Israel about every day or other day over the last few weeks, and half of them fall short and land in Egypt or Saudi Arabia, and the other half get shot down. But in response, the IAF, the Israel Air Force, launched a sortie of 20 warplanes on the port city of Hodeidah this week. And one of the interesting targets this time was a British ship that the Houthis had hijacked. Which brings us to the next report. This week, the Houthis resumed their assault on the international shipping lanes and have already sunk 2 ships, of which, as of Wednesday morning, the personnel, the crew of the second ship, was still at sea, waiting to be rescued. We will see how the world, if the world, responds to this. And moving considerably farther out to an area that I usually don't report on is the Ukraine, the Russian-Ukraine war. Reuters reported earlier this month that the Dutch defense minister said that there is widespread use of chemical weapons by the Russians. And this, of course, for anyone with half a brain, is incredibly dangerous because the more such non-conventional methods are used, the more they become normalized. Which brings us to the question of what would be next: biological, nuclear, and who will be next? Iran, the Houthis. But anyways, we will see if and how these reports are confirmed. The Russians have denied it as they have in the past, and we'll see if and how the world responds. In any case, for now, that's it. And I want to wish you all a Shabbat Shalom, and please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing the video, especially if you can think of someone who would enjoy it. God bless you all, and Shalom.